I froze in the doorway of our bedroom, the grocery bag still in my hands, when I heard him say it to his mother over the phone. "She's too old for love now, Mom, I'm just staying out of pity." My heart didn't just break, it shattered into 1,000 pieces, each one cutting deeper than the last. My name is Vivian, and at 52 years old, I thought I knew what love was supposed to look like after 30 years of marriage. I stood there, invisible in my own home, listening to my husband Kenneth describe me like I was some expired product he couldn't return to the store. The carrots I bought for his favorite pot roast rolled across the floor, and I didn't even move to pick them up. For a moment I wondered if he was right. I looked down at my hands that had cooked thousands of meals, changed diapers, nursed sick children, held him through his father's funeral, and saw only wrinkles and age spots. When had I become too old for love? When had I become invisible? But then something else happened. Something shifted deep in my chest, like a door I didn't know existed suddenly swinging open. I picked up those carrots one by one, and as I did, I made a decision that would change everything. Let me tell you how I got here, to this moment of crystal clear awakening. And let me tell you what I did next, because if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told you're too old, too tired, too anything to matter anymore, you need to hear this story. Kenneth and I met when I was 22, fresh out of college with a teaching degree and dreams bigger than the Montana sky I grew up under. He was 25, working in commercial real estate, with a smile that could light up a room and ambitions that matched my own. We got married 6 months after our first date at a coffee shop in downtown Portland, where we'd moved for his job. Back then, he used to bring me wildflowers he'd pick on his way home from work. He'd kiss my forehead and tell me I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. We built a life together. I taught 3rd grade for 15 years while he climbed the corporate ladder. We had 2 children, Daniel and Emma. I packed lunches with encouraging notes tucked inside, attended every parent-teacher conference on both sides of the desk, coached Emma's soccer team, and drove Daniel to guitar lessons twice a week for 7 years. When Kenneth's company expanded and demanded longer hours, I became the primary parent. When his stress levels skyrocketed, I became his therapist. When his father died, I became his rock. And somewhere in all that becoming, I stopped being Vivian. I became Mom. I became Kenneth's wife. I became the PTA president, the neighborhood organizer, the person who always brought the best dish to potlucks. But Vivian, the woman who loved jazz music and used to paint watercolors on Sunday mornings, who dreamed of opening a little bookshop cafe someday, she got packed away like winter clothes in the attic, waiting for a season that never seemed to come. The changes in our marriage didn't happen overnight. They were so gradual, so subtle, that I didn't notice the erosion until I was standing in a canyon wondering how I'd gotten there. It started about 5 years ago, right after Emma left for college. Suddenly, the house felt too big, too quiet. Kenneth started working later. His business trips became more frequent. When he was home, he was on his phone or laptop, his mind always somewhere else. I tried to reconnect. I really did. I suggested date nights, weekend getaways, couples cooking classes. He'd agree half-heartedly, then cancel at the last minute because of work. I bought new clothes, changed my hair, made reservations at restaurants he used to love. He'd show up distracted, checking his watch, his eyes glazing over when I talked about my day volunteering at the community center or the memoir I was trying to write. The intimacy died first, then the conversation, then the eye contact. We became roommates who shared a mortgage and a last name, nothing more. But I told myself this was normal. This was what long marriages looked like. This was the price of stability, of raising children, of building a life together. I told myself that love evolved, matured, became something quieter and less demonstrative. I was lying to myself. The truth started revealing itself in small ways. A new cologne I didn't recognize. Receipts for restaurants we'd never been to together. A sudden interest in the gym after years of me begging him to exercise. New clothes, designer shirts, expensive jeans, things that seemed too young, too trendy for a 55-year-old real estate executive. When I asked about any of it, he had reasonable explanations. The cologne was a gift from a client. The restaurant receipts were business dinners. The gym membership was doctor's orders after his physical. The clothes were necessary for client meetings with younger entrepreneurs. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But there were other signs too. The way he'd take phone calls in the garage, How he changed all his passwords and kept his phone face down on every surface. The mysterious charges on our credit card that he'd explain away with technical jargon about business expenses. The weekend conference in San Francisco that he didn't want me to attend, even though spouses were explicitly invited. I started feeling crazy. Was I paranoid? Was I one of those suspicious, nagging wives I'd always pitied? I'd look at myself in the mirror, really look, and see every year etched into my face. My body wasn't what it used to be, despite my own gym efforts. Gravity had done its work. My hair had more gray than brown, even with monthly color treatments. The skin on my neck had that crepey texture no amount of expensive cream could fix. Maybe he wasn't cheating. Maybe he was just bored. Bored with me. Bored with our life. And honestly, could I blame him? That's where my head was that Tuesday afternoon when I came home early from the community center. We were planning a fundraiser for the local food bank, and I'd volunteered to make 3 dozen cupcakes because of course I had. I'd left my phone at home, something I rarely did, and decided to grab it and maybe start baking early. I pulled into our driveway at 2:30 in the afternoon, humming along to an old Etta James song on the radio. The house looked normal, quiet, peaceful. Our neighborhood was one of those picture-perfect Portland suburbs with tree-lined streets and houses that all looked vaguely similar, craftsman-style homes with neat lawns and flower boxes. Ours had the red door I'd insisted on painting 5 years ago, saying it would bring good luck. Kenneth had rolled his eyes but helped me paint it anyway. I remember that detail because I stood in front of that red door for a moment, fishing for my keys, thinking about how I believed in signs and luck and fresh starts back then. How naive I'd been. The house was quiet when I entered. I called out Kenneth's name just in case but got no response. His car wasn't in the driveway, so I assumed he was at work where he should be at 2:30 on a Tuesday. I kicked off my shoes, grabbed a glass of water, and headed upstairs to get my phone from the bedroom. That's when I heard it. His voice, muffled but clear, coming from behind our closed bedroom door. He was on the phone, speaking in that low, intimate tone he used to use with me a lifetime ago. I should have announced myself. I should have knocked. But something made me stop, my hand on the doorknob, my breath caught in my throat. "She's too old for love now, Mom. I'm just staying out of pity." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled backward, pressing my hand against the hallway wall to steady myself. He continued, and I stood there, frozen, listening to my husband dissect our marriage for his mother's benefit. I know. I should have left years ago. But the kids. And you know how she is. She'd fall apart. She has no career anymore, no real friends outside of those community center people. What would she even do without me? There was a pause as his mother responded, and then he laughed. Actually laughed. "You're right, Mom. I've been too kind, too patient. Sandra says the same thing. She can't understand why I'm still." Sandra. The name landed like a bomb in my chest. Sandra. There it was. The confirmation I'd been dreading and somehow expecting all at once. "I need to handle this carefully," Kenneth continued. "The house, the assets, it's complicated. Jim says I should wait until after the fiscal year closes, get everything organized. Then I can file. She'll get what's fair. But I'm not going to let her take me to the cleaners because she's spent 30 years playing housewife. Playing housewife. 30 years. Reduced to playing pretend. I don't remember walking downstairs. I don't remember picking up those grocery bags or the carrots rolling across the floor. The next clear memory I have is sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my hands, feeling like I'd woken up from a 30-year coma to discover I'd been living someone else's life. Too old for love. Staying out of pity. Playing housewife. The words looped in my mind like a cruel mantra. And with each repetition, something happened. The shock began to crystallize into something else. Something harder. Clearer. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind. The cold, calculated kind. The kind that sharpens your mind instead of clouding it. I was 52 years old. I had given this man 3 decades of my life. I had supported his career, raised his children, managed his household, hosted his clients, comforted him through every setback and celebrated every success. I had sacrificed my own teaching career when his company relocated to Portland. I had put my dreams on hold, that bookshop, Café, the writing, the traveling I'd wanted to do. I had made myself smaller so he could be bigger. and he thought I was too old for love. He was staying out of pity. He had a woman named Sandra telling him to leave me. He had a lawyer named Jim helping him strategize how to divorce me without losing too much money. I stood up from that kitchen table, and I want you to understand something. I was a different woman than the one who'd walked through the door 30 minutes earlier. That Vivian, the one who doubted herself, who looked in mirrors and saw only deficiency, who apologized for existing, she was gone. The Vivian who remained was done apologizing. I didn't confront him that day. I know some of you are probably shouting at your screens right now, telling me I should have marched upstairs and thrown his phone out the window. But I've learned something about power. Real power comes from patience and planning, not from emotional explosions that make you feel good for 5 minutes and cost you everything in the long run. Instead, I dried my tears, put away the groceries, and started making that pot roast. When Kenneth came downstairs an hour later, freshly showered and smiling like nothing had happened, I smiled back. "Dinner will be ready at 6, I told him, my voice steady and warm. "Your favorite." He kissed my forehead, an absent automatic gesture, and said, "You're the best, Viv." I watched him walk into his study and I thought, you have no idea what's coming. Over the next few days, I became a detective in my own life. I started paying attention to everything, not with the anxious paranoia of before, but with the cool focus of someone gathering evidence. I noted his patterns, his habits, his lies. When he said he was working late, I'd casually ask about specific projects, watching him fumble for details. When he mentioned client meetings, I'd remember the names and later check them against his firm's actual client list through their public website. I also called our daughter Emma. She was 24, living in Seattle, working in marketing for a tech startup. We'd always been close, but I'd been so consumed with trying to save my marriage that I'd let some of that closeness slip. When she answered, I could hear the surprise in her voice. "Mom? Is everything okay? You never call in the middle of the day." "Everything's fine, sweetheart. I just missed your voice. Tell me about work." We talked for an hour. I let her tell me about her projects, her difficult boss, the guy she was casually dating. I really listened in a way I realized I hadn't in months. And then carefully I asked about her father. "How did Dad seem at Christmas? Did he say anything to you about work? He's been so stressed lately." There was a pause. Too long of a pause. "Mom, is everything really okay between you two?" My heart started racing, but I kept my voice light. "Of course, honey. Why do you ask?" Another pause. "It's just, I don't know. Dad seemed different at Christmas. Distant. And Daniel said something weird to me." "What did your brother say?" "He said Dad asked him about divorce lawyers. Like hypothetically. Daniel thought it was weird, but Dad played it off like he was asking for a friend at work." I closed my eyes. Even my children had seen the signs I'd been desperately ignoring. "When did Daniel tell you this?" I asked. "A few weeks ago." "Mom, seriously, what's going on?" I couldn't tell her. "Not yet. Not until I had a plan. Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart. Your father and I are just navigating some middle-age stuff. It's normal. But thank you for telling me." After we hung up, I sat with this new information. Kenneth had already consulted Daniel about divorce lawyers. This wasn't a passing thought or a moment of frustration. This was premeditated. He'd been planning this, probably for months, while I'd been making pot roast and trying to spice up our sex life and telling myself everything was fine. The anger came back white hot this time. But I breathed through it. I had to be smarter than my emotions. I started with our finances. Kenneth had always handled the money. "I'm in real estate, babe, let me manage it," he'd say, and I'd been happy to let him. Now I logged into our bank accounts, investment portfolios, and credit card statements. What I found made my stomach turn. Over the past year, Kenneth had been systematically moving money. Small transfers here and there, amounts that wouldn't trigger immediate alarm. $5,000 to a separate account I didn't have access to. $3,000 to another. He'd opened a credit card in just his name and was charging thousands on it monthly. Restaurants I'd never been to, hotels, jewelry stores. There was a recurring charge for an apartment rental downtown. An apartment. Sandra had an apartment. Kenneth was paying for it. I felt sick, but I didn't stop looking. I made copies of everything, screenshots, printed statements, detailed notes with dates and amounts. I created a hidden email account and sent everything to myself, then to a cloud storage service he couldn't access. Then I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, the best divorce attorney in Portland, according to 3 hours of research and reading reviews. Her name was Patricia Cordova, and she had a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, and expensive. Her consultation fee alone was $500, but I didn't care. I used our joint credit card to pay for it. Kenneth would see the charge eventually, but I'd worry about that later. Patricia's office was in downtown Portland, in one of those modern buildings with too much glass and exposed brick. She was in her early 50s, impeccably dressed in a navy suit, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through me when I walked into her office. "Tell me everything," she said after we'd exchanged pleasantries. So I did. I told her about the phone call, about Sandra, about the money transfers, about Kenneth consulting our son, about lawyers. I showed her the evidence I'd gathered, bank statements, credit card receipts, my detailed notes. I told her about our 30-year marriage, about the children, about the house we'd bought 20 years ago that was now worth 3 times what we'd paid for it. Patricia listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and studied me. "You've done excellent work documenting everything," she said. "Most clients come to me emotional and empty-handed. You came prepared. That tells me something important." "What does it tell you?" "That you're not going to be a victim in this. You're going to be a fighter." She leaned forward. "Here's the reality, Vivian. Your husband is planning to divorce you, and from what you've shown me, he's trying to hide assets to minimize what you'll get in the settlement. The apartment rental, the separate accounts, the strategic timing around the fiscal year. These are all red flags. What do I do? You have several options. You can confront him now, which will likely accelerate everything and give him time to hide more assets. Or you can wait, continue gathering evidence, and file first. In Oregon, we're an equitable distribution state, which means assets don't have to be split 50-50, but they should be divided fairly. Given the length of your marriage and the fact that you sacrificed your career for his, you have a strong case for getting at least half of everything plus spousal support." "I want to file first," I said without hesitation. Patricia smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, it was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. "Good. That's what I was hoping you'd say. Here's what we're going to do." Over the next hour, Patricia laid out a strategy. We would spend the next few weeks documenting everything, his affair with Sandra, the hidden assets, his plans to divorce me. She'd hire a private investigator to gather photographic evidence of the affair. We'd get records of all his communications if possible. And then when we had an airtight case, we'd file for divorce and immediately seek a court order to freeze all joint assets so he couldn't move or hide any more money. "This is going to get ugly," Patricia warned me. "When men like your husband get caught, they don't go quietly. He's going to try to make you look bad, claim you're vindictive or crazy. He's going to try to minimize his own behavior. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about that phone call. Too old for love. Staying out of pity. Playing housewife. "I'm prepared," I said. The private investigator's name was Marcus, a retired police detective in his 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. He came to Patricia's office 3 days later, and I gave him everything I knew about Kenneth's schedule, about Sandra, about the apartment downtown. "I'll have something for you within a week," Marcus said. "These cases are usually pretty straightforward. Men who think they're being careful are often surprisingly sloppy." He was right. 5 days later, Marcus presented me with a folder full of photographs. Kenneth and Sandra entering the downtown apartment together, her hand on his arm. Kenneth and Sandra at an expensive restaurant, holding hands across the table. Kenneth and Sandra kissing in the parking lot of his office building. Sandra was younger than me, maybe 40, with blonde hair and a figure that suggested personal trainers and expensive gym memberships. She was pretty in a generic, polished way. I looked at those photos and felt nothing. No jealousy, no heartbreak, no rage. Just a cold satisfaction that I had the evidence I needed. But Marcus had found something else too. Something that would become the most powerful weapon in my arsenal. "I did some background on Sandra," he said, sliding another document across the table. "She works at your husband's company. She's a marketing director. They've been having this affair for at least 18 months, based on what I could piece together." 18 months. A year and a half of lies. But here's the interesting part, Marcus continued. She's married. Has been for 12 years. Her husband owns a construction company, pretty successful one too. And based on some discreet inquiries, he has no idea about the affair. I looked at Patricia. Can we use this? Absolutely, Patricia said. If Kenneth's affair partner is also married, it strengthens your case. It shows a pattern of deception and betrayal. Plus, if Sandra's husband finds out. She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. I knew what she was suggesting. If Sandra's husband discovered the affair, there would be consequences for Sandra, certainly, but also for Kenneth. Professional consequences since they worked together. Financial consequences in Sandra's own divorce. Social consequences. Part of me hesitated. Was I really willing to blow up Sandra's life the way Kenneth had blown up mine? Did two wrongs make a right? But then I remembered. She can't understand why I'm still. Sandra knew Kenneth was married. She knew what she was doing. She'd made her choices just like he had. Find out everything you can about Sandra's husband, I told Marcus. His name, where he works, how to contact him. But don't reach out yet. Not until I'm ready. For the next 3 weeks I lived a double life. During the day I was still the dutiful wife. I made dinners, did laundry, smiled at Kenneth when he came home late smelling of unfamiliar perfume. I asked about his day, listened to his vague responses, and played my part perfectly. At night, after he fell asleep, I'd slip out of bed and continue gathering evidence, building my case, planning my strategy with Patricia and Marcus. It was exhausting. It was also empowering in a way I'd never experienced before. For 30 years I'd been reactive, responding to Kenneth's needs, his schedule, his demands. Now, for the first time, I was driving the narrative. I was in control. I also started preparing for my life after divorce. I opened my own bank account, one Kenneth knew nothing about, and started siphoning small amounts of money from our joint accounts. Nothing large enough to raise alarms, but enough to build a safety net. I contacted old colleagues from my teaching days and started putting out feelers for tutoring jobs or part-time positions. I researched apartments I could afford on my own, and I started thinking about that dream I'd put away in the attic. The bookshop Café. One Saturday morning, while Kenneth was allegedly at a client golf outing, which Marcus later confirmed was actually a weekend trip to wine country with Sandra, I drove into downtown Portland and walked around the neighborhoods I'd always loved. The Pearl District, with its mix of old warehouses converted into art galleries and trendy restaurants. Northwest Portland, with its tree-lined streets and Victorian homes. And there, on a corner in Northwest, I saw it. A small storefront with a For Lease sign in the window. It had been a coffee shop once, judging by the remnants of a menu board and some cafe-style seating left behind. Large windows flooded the space with natural light. Exposed brick walls. High ceilings with original wooden beams. It was perfect. I stood outside that empty storefront for 20 minutes, imagining bookshelves lining the walls, small tables and comfortable chairs, the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods. A place where people could come to read, to talk, to feel welcome. Place that would be entirely mine. I took down the leasing agent's number. I didn't call, not yet. But I kept it in my wallet, a talisman of the future I was building. During this time, I also reconnected with parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. I started painting again, watercolors, just like I used to do on Sunday mornings before marriage and motherhood consumed everything. I'd set up an easel in the spare bedroom, the room that used to be Daniel's before he went to college, and I'd lose myself in color and form for hours. The paintings weren't particularly good, but that wasn't the point. The point was that I was doing something for myself, something that had nothing to do with being a wife or a mother or a volunteer. I also started journaling. Every night I'd write down what I was feeling, what I was planning, what I was afraid of. The journal became a record of my transformation, page after page documenting the death of one version of myself and the birth of another. I wrote about the anger, yes, but also about the grief. Because even though Kenneth had betrayed me, even though he'd called me too old for love and reduced our marriage to an obligation, there was still a part of me that mourned what we'd once had. Or maybe what I'd thought we'd had. I mourned the girl I'd been at 22, so full of hope and trust. I mourned the future I'd imagined, growing old together, traveling in retirement, becoming grandparents side by side. I mourned the version of Kenneth I'd loved, even though I was beginning to realize that version might have been a fiction I'd created to make the reality bearable. Grief is funny that way. It doesn't follow a straight line, and it doesn't respect your anger or your plans for revenge. It just shows up, uninvited, in the middle of the night or while you're chopping vegetables or driving to the grocery store. And you have to feel it, all of it, before you can move forward. By the 4th week, Patricia told me we had enough. We could keep gathering evidence forever, she said, but we have more than enough to file. The question is, when do you want to pull the trigger? I thought about it. Kenneth's birthday was coming up in 2 weeks. We'd been invited to a charity gala his company was sponsoring, a big event with all his colleagues and clients, the kind of thing where appearances mattered immensely. He'd asked me to buy a new dress, to get my hair done, to look the part of the successful executive's wife. I want to file the day before the gala, I said. Patricia raised her eyebrows. That's bold. He'll be furious. It could cause a scene. Good, I said. Let it cause a scene. For 30 years I've worried about not embarrassing him, not making waves, being the perfect supportive wife. I'm done protecting his image. In those final days before filing, I had a moment of doubt. It came on a Wednesday evening, when Kenneth came home with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, something he hadn't done in years. He seemed lighter somehow, happier, and for a moment I wondered if I'd misunderstood everything. Maybe the affair was over. Maybe he'd realized what he had and was trying to fix things. I thought we could eat together, he said, setting the containers on the kitchen table. Just the two of us. Like old times. We ate pad thai and green curry, and he asked me about my day, really asked, with eye contact and follow-up questions. He told me about a difficult client situation he'd resolved, and I found myself laughing at his impression of the client's ridiculous demands. For an hour it felt like we were Kenneth and Vivian again, the couple we'd been before everything went wrong. When we finished eating, he reached across the table and took my hand. I know I haven't been the best husband lately, he said. I've been distracted with work, stressed about money. But I want you to know that I appreciate you. Everything you do for us, for this family. I don't say it enough, but I see you, Viv. And I'm grateful. My throat tightened. This was the man I'd married. This was the Kenneth who brought wildflowers and kissed my forehead and made me feel like the center of his universe. For a moment I wanted to believe him. I wanted to call Patricia and tell her to stop everything, that we were going to work it out. But then I remembered. Too old for love. Staying out of pity. Sandra. This wasn't reconciliation. This was manipulation. Kenneth could feel the ground shifting beneath him, even if he didn't know why yet. He was trying to secure his position, to make sure I stayed compliant while he executed his plan. Thank you for saying that, I said, squeezing his hand. It means a lot. And inside I thought, your time is almost up. The day I chose to file for divorce was a Thursday. The gala was Friday evening. I planned it down to the minute. That morning, Kenneth left for work at his usual time, 7:30. He kissed my forehead in that automatic way, told me he'd be home by 6, reminded me that we needed to leave for the gala by 7 tomorrow. I smiled and told him I'd already picked up my dress from the cleaners. At 9 a.m., a process server arrived at Kenneth's office and handed him the divorce papers. Patricia had arranged for it to happen in the middle of a meeting with several of his colleagues, not to be cruel, but because we'd learned he was planning to work from the apartment later that day, and we needed to ensure he was served properly. At 9:15 my phone started ringing. Kenneth. I didn't answer. He called 3 more times in the next 10 minutes. Then came the text. What the hell is this? Call me right now. This is insane. We need to talk. Vivian, answer your damn phone. I turned off my phone and went to Patricia's office, where we'd planned to spend the day. Marcus was there too, along with another woman I hadn't met, a forensic accountant Patricia had brought in to analyze Kenneth's financial maneuvers. He's been served, Patricia said, checking her own phone. And according to my contact at the courthouse, the judge has approved our emergency motion to freeze all joint assets. Kenneth can't move any money, sell any property, or access any joint accounts without court approval. I felt a surge of satisfaction so powerful it almost scared me. Kenneth was probably losing his mind right now, and I felt no sympathy. Only justice. Around 11, Patricia's phone rang. It was Kenneth's lawyer. He'd already hired someone, which told me he'd had a lawyer on standby all along. Tell him we have no interest in mediation at this time, Patricia said coolly into the phone. My client has been more than patient. Your client can respond to the filing through proper legal channels. She listened for a moment then smiled. Yes, I'm aware of the gala tomorrow. That's not my concern or my client's concern. Have a good day. She hung up and looked at me. His lawyer is scrambling. He wants to know what you want, what it will take to make this go away quietly. Nothing makes it go away, I said. This is happening. On the record, in public, exactly as it should be. That afternoon, while still at Patricia's office, I did something I'd been both dreading and anticipating. I called Sandra's husband. His name was Robert Chen, and he owned a successful construction company called Chan & Associates. Marcus had provided me with his direct office number. When I called, a receptionist answered, and I asked to speak to Mr. Chan regarding a personal matter. Who may I say is calling? She asked. A friend of his wife's, I said. It wasn't exactly true, but it got me through to him. This is Robert Chun, a deep voice said a moment later. Mr. Chun, my name is Vivian, and I need to talk to you about something important. It concerns your wife, Sandra. There was a pause. Is she all right? Is something wrong? His first thought was for her safety. His concern was immediate and genuine. It made what I had to do both easier and harder. She's physically fine, I said carefully. But there's something you need to know, and I think it's better you hear it from me than discover it some other way. I took a breath. Your wife has been having an affair with my husband for the past 18 months. They work together at Sterling & Associates Real Estate. I have extensive documentation, photographs, and evidence, and I wanted you to be aware before this becomes public knowledge. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought he'd hung up. Mr. Chan. I'm here. His voice had changed, gone flat and hard. You're certain about this? I'm certain. I can send you the evidence if you want to see it. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, Mr. Chan. I'm telling you because you deserve to know the truth, just like I deserve to know it. Another long pause. Send me everything, he said finally. My email is robert@chunassociates.com. I will. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you. Don't apologize, he said quietly. You're doing me a favor, even if it doesn't feel like one right now. After I hung up, I sent Robert Chen a carefully curated selection of the evidence Marcus had gathered, enough to prove the affair beyond doubt, but nothing gratuitous or unnecessarily cruel. Then I sat back and waited for the dominoes to fall. They fell fast. By evening, I'd turned my phone back on to find 43 missed calls and dozens of texts from Kenneth. They'd evolved from anger to bargaining to desperate pleading. We can work this out. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. Please don't do this. Think about the kids. You're destroying our family. I love you. I've always loved you. That last one almost made me laugh. He loved me? The woman who was too old for love? The woman he was staying with out of pity? I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I sent a group text to both Daniel and Emma. I need you to know that I filed for divorce from your father. This wasn't an easy decision, but it's the right one. I'll explain everything when you're ready to hear it. I love you both, and this changes nothing about that. Emma called immediately, crying. Daniel texted that he'd call later, that he needed to process. Both reactions were expected, and I prepared myself for them. The hardest part of leaving Kenneth wasn't leaving him. It was watching my children hurt because of choices he'd made. I talked to Emma for over an hour that night, sitting in Patricia's empty conference room while the city lights twinkled through the windows. She asked me why, and I told her everything, not to turn her against her father, but because she deserved the truth. I suspected something, she said through tears. At Christmas, the way he looked at his phone, the way he'd leave the room for calls. I thought I was imagining it. You weren't imagining it, sweetheart. And I need you to know that this isn't about me not trying hard enough or not being patient enough. I tried for years. But your father made choices that broke our marriage, and I can't fix what he broke. Are you going to be okay? She asked, her voice small. Yes, I said, and I meant it. I'm going to be better than okay. I'm going to be free. That night, I slept in our guest room for the first time. I packed a bag earlier with clothes and essentials, turning that space into my temporary bedroom. As I lay there, in the quiet darkness of a house that no longer felt like a home, I felt something unexpected. Peace. For the first time in years, my chest didn't feel tight with anxiety. My mind wasn't racing with questions about what I'd done wrong, or how I could fix things. I wasn't listening for Kenneth's car in the driveway or trying to interpret his moods or walking on eggshells around his ego. I was free. The next day, Friday, the day of the gala, was chaos. Kenneth came home around noon, having apparently left work early. I heard him downstairs, heard him calling my name, heard him banging on the guest room door. "Vivian, open this door. We need to talk." "We can talk through our lawyers," I said calmly. "Damn it, Viv, this is ridiculous. Over one stupid mistake? After 30 years. One stupid mistake. That's what he was calling it. An 18-month affair with a coworker, hidden assets, plans to divorce me on his terms. All just one stupid mistake. Go away, Kenneth, I said. I'm not going to the gala without you. We're supposed to present the scholarship award together. Everyone's expecting us. Then I guess you'll have to explain to everyone why I'm not there. Or you could just lie. You're good at that." I heard him slam his hand against the door, heard him pacing in the hallway. Then finally he left. I stayed in that guest room most of the day, only venturing out for food and water when I knew he wasn't around. Around 4 p.m. Patricia called. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Better than I expected, actually." "Good. Because I have some news. Robertson filed for divorce from Sandra this morning. Apparently, after receiving your email last night, he did some digging of his own and discovered she'd been using their joint credit card for hotel rooms with your husband. He's furious, and from what my sources tell me, he's hiring one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in the city." I felt a pang of sympathy for Robert, followed immediately by satisfaction. Sandra was about to learn the same lesson Kenneth was learning. Actions have consequences. "There's more," Patricia continued. "Kenneth's company has launched an internal investigation into his relationship with Sandra. Apparently, they have a fraternization policy that he violated, especially since she reports indirectly to him. There could be professional consequences, suspension, termination, or forced resignation." "Good," I said simply. "Also, the story leaks somehow." Patricia's voice was carefully neutral. "There's a piece on a local business blog about a prominent real estate executive facing divorce proceedings and a workplace affair scandal. They don't name names, but everyone in that industry will know who they're talking about. The gala tonight is going to be interesting." After Patricia and I hung up, I did something that surprised even me. I got dressed for the gala. Not in the expensive dress Kenneth had wanted me to wear. I'd returned that to the store the day before, and used the refund money to make my first payment to the leasing agent for that storefront cafe. Instead, I wore a simple black dress I'd had for years, paired with my grandmother's pearl earrings. I arrived at the gala alone, 45 minutes after it had started. The event was at the Sentinel Hotel, in their grand ballroom with its soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers. I walked in with my head high, and I swear the room went quiet. Kenneth was near the bar, Sandra beside him, which was bold, considering everyone knew. He looked rumpled and stressed, his tie slightly askew. When he saw me, his face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, fear, and something that might have been shame. I walked right past him. I spent the next hour circulating through the room, talking to people I'd known for years through Kenneth's business. The wives of his colleagues and clients, many of whom I'd had superficial friendships with, and I told them the truth. Not in a bitter, vindictive way, but calmly and factually. Kenneth and I are divorcing. He's been having an affair with Sandra Drake for 18 months. I found out he'd been hiding assets and planning to leave me, so I filed first. I wanted you to hear it from me. The reactions ranged from shocked sympathy to knowing looks that suggested I wasn't the first wife in this circle to deal with infidelity. Several women pulled me aside to share their own stories, their own experiences with husbands who'd strayed or left or become strangers. One woman, Charlotte, the wife of Kenneth's biggest client, hugged me and whispered, "I always liked you better than him anyway." Another woman, Diane, whose husband worked directly under Kenneth, told me something that shifted my perspective entirely. "I'm glad you're getting out," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else could hear. "Kenneth's been difficult to work with lately. Arrogant. Dismissive. My husband came home last month saying Kenneth had berated a junior associate in front of the whole office for missing a deadline. The old Kenneth would never have done that. I realized then that Kenneth hadn't just changed toward me. He'd changed, period. Success and ego had transformed him into someone I didn't recognize, someone who treated people as disposable, whether they were his wife or his subordinates. By the time the scholarship presentation rolled around, the one Kenneth and I were supposed to give together, Kenneth had to do it alone. He stumbled through it, clearly uncomfortable, his usual charisma completely absent. Sandra had disappeared, likely warned by someone to leave before the situation got worse. When Kenneth mentioned family values in his speech, the scholarship was named after his father, who'd valued education and integrity. I saw several people in the audience exchange glances. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I left the gala around 10, driving home through the rain that had started to fall, feeling lighter than I had in years. As I drove, I thought about something my mother had told me when I was young. The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. She'd been right about both parts. The next few months were brutal, I won't lie to you. Divorce is never easy, even when it's necessary. Kenneth fought every step of the way, trying to minimize my share of assets, claiming I'd hidden money, laughable considering what he'd done, painting himself as the victim of a vindictive wife who'd embarrassed him publicly. His lawyer was aggressive, filing motion after motion trying to drag things out. But Patricia was better. She systematically dismantled every argument Kenneth made. She presented our evidence, the affair, the hidden assets, the apartment he'd rented for Sandra, his own words from that phone call I'd overheard. She brought in the forensic accountant, who testified about Kenneth's attempts to conceal money. She presented testimony from Marcus, the private investigator, complete with those damning photographs. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Constance Hartford, was clearly unimpressed with Kenneth's behavior. "Mr. Sterling," she said during one particularly contentious hearing, her voice sharp, "you violated your marriage vows, hid marital assets, and demonstrated a clear intent to defraud your spouse of her rightful share of property accumulated during a 30-year marriage. Furthermore, you conducted an affair with a subordinate employee, violating both your professional ethics and your personal commitments. This court is not inclined to reward such behavior." Kenneth's lawyer tried to argue that the affair was irrelevant to asset division, but Judge Hartford shut him down. "In Oregon, while we are a no-fault divorce state, the court can consider the economic impact of a spouse's behavior," she said. "Mr. Sterling spent marital funds on his affair, the apartment, the restaurants, the gifts. Those expenditures directly diminish the marital estate, and I will take that into account when making my ruling." During one of the breaks in the proceedings, I ran into Kenneth in the courthouse hallway. It was the first time we'd been alone together since I'd filed. "You didn't have to destroy me," he said, his voice raw. "You could have handled this privately." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. This man who I'd shared 30 years of my life with, who I'd built a home with, raised children with, who I thought I'd grow old with. He was gone if he'd ever really existed. "I didn't destroy you, Kenneth," I said quietly. "You destroyed yourself. You made the choices that led us here. You had the affair. You hid the money. You planned to divorce me on your terms, leaving me with as little as possible. All I did was refuse to be a victim. I told you I was sorry. I told you we could work it out. You told me I was too old for love. You told your mother you were staying with me out of pity. You reduced 30 years of marriage to an inconvenience you were planning to escape from. Your apology doesn't erase that, Kenneth. It doesn't fix what you broke." He opened his mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. "I'm done, Kenneth. With this conversation, with your excuses, with caring about what you think or feel. We had something once, or at least I thought we did. But that's over now. And honestly, I'm better off without you." I walked away, leaving him standing there in that courthouse hallway, and I didn't look back. In the end, I got more than I'd hoped for. 60% of our assets, including the house, which the judge awarded to me outright based on my contributions as homemaker and Kenneth's attempts to hide money. Substantial spousal support for 7 years. Half of Kenneth's retirement accounts. And perhaps most satisfying, the judge ordered Kenneth to pay all my legal fees, which had climbed well into 6 figures thanks to his combative approach. But the real consequences for Kenneth went beyond the financial. His company, after completing their investigation, forced him to resign. The optics of a senior executive having an affair with a subordinate, coupled with the public scandal, were too much for their corporate image. He received a severance package but had to sign a non-disparagement agreement and give up any future claims. The resignation was announced in an internal memo that somehow found its way to the local business press. I didn't leak it, I had nothing to do with it, but Kenneth was convinced I had. He sent me a series of angry emails accusing me of sabotaging his career, which I forwarded to Patricia without responding. She sent a cease and desist letter, and the emails stopped. Sandra's divorce from Robert was equally messy. Robert, true to form, had hired an aggressive attorney who went scorched earth. Sandra lost her job, terminated for violating company policy, and lost most of her marital assets. The judge in her case was even less sympathetic than Judge Hartford had been, particularly after Robert's lawyer presented evidence that Sandra had used marital funds to buy gifts for Kenneth, including an expensive watch that cost nearly $5,000. Last I heard, Sandra had moved to California to escape the scandal, taking a lower-level position at a small real estate firm in Sacramento. Her reputation in Portland's real estate community was destroyed, and starting over somewhere else was her only option. Kenneth tried to maintain his lifestyle for a while, but without his job and with his reputation damaged, clients dried up. He tried to start his own real estate consultancy, but word travels fast in business circles. Nobody wanted to work with the guy who cheated on his wife and lost everything. The few clients he did attract were small-time, the kind of deals that barely covered his overhead. He had to sell his car, the BMW he'd been so proud of, and downgrade to something more practical. He moved out of the temporary luxury apartment he'd rented after I got the house and into something smaller, cheaper. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was struggling, living paycheck to paycheck, his confidence and his swagger completely gone. Part of me felt sorry for him, but only a small part. The larger part of me recognized that consequences aren't punishment. They're just the natural result of your choices. Kenneth had made his choices and now he was living with them. Meanwhile, I was building something new. With the settlement money and the spousal support, I had the financial security to take risks I'd never been able to take before. I signed the lease on that storefront in Northwest Portland. I hired contractors, ironically, some from Robert Chen's company, which had given me a generous divorce survivor discount, after I'd reached out to thank him for his unintended role in exposing the affair. Robert and I had coffee once, a few months after both our divorces were finalized. He was a kind man, thoughtful and genuine, still processing the betrayal but moving forward. We talked about what we'd learned, about how we were rebuilding our lives. He told me he'd started dating again cautiously, and that his construction business was actually thriving. Apparently the sympathy factor had brought him a lot of new clients. People like to support the wronged party, he said with a wry smile. Silver lining, I guess. We stayed in touch after that, not romantically but as friends who'd survived the same storm. He gave me advice on the cafe renovations, even came by a few times to check the contractor's work. His company did the electrical and plumbing upgrades at cost, which saved me thousands of dollars. I spent months designing every detail of the cafe, from the custom bookshelves to the menu to the logo. I wanted it to feel warm and welcoming, a place where people could escape from the world for a while, lose themselves in a book, connect with friends over coffee, or just sit quietly with their thoughts. I called it Chapter 2 Café. The name felt right. It acknowledged that there had been a first chapter, that I'd lived a whole life before this, but it celebrated the fact that the story wasn't over, that I was still writing, still creating, still becoming. The cafe had exposed brick walls that I left as they were, raw and honest. Large windows that flooded the space with natural light. Comfortable chairs and couches in reading nooks. A long communal table for people who wanted to work or study together. And books, hundreds of books, carefully chosen, lining the walls on custom-built shelves. I created a menu that reflected my own tastes. Good coffee, of course, but also loose-leaf teas, fresh pastries from a local bakery, soups and sandwiches made daily with local ingredients. In the evenings, we'd serve wine and cheese plates, transforming from a daytime cafe into a cozy evening gathering space. I hired a small staff of people who loved books and coffee as much as I did. My manager, Sophie, was a former librarian in her 30s who'd been laid off when her branch closed. My head barista, Marcus, not the PI, different Marcus, was a poetry major from Portland State who made the most beautiful latte art I'd ever seen. And my cook, Rosa, was a 60-year-old woman from Mexico who made soups that could heal your soul. We became a family, the staff and I. We had team meetings where everyone had a voice. We celebrated birthdays and milestones. We supported each other through bad days and celebrated good ones. It was everything my marriage hadn't been: collaborative, respectful, built on genuine care rather than obligation. Emma came home for the grand opening, as did Daniel, and seeing them there supporting me reminded me that good things had survived the wreckage of my marriage. We'd had hard conversations in those months about their father, about my choices, about what family meant when the foundation cracked. Daniel had been angry at first, not at me but at the situation. He felt caught between us, loving both his parents but struggling to reconcile the father he knew with the man who'd betrayed his mother. We talked about it over dinner one night, just the two of us at a quiet restaurant near his hotel. "I always thought you guys would make it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You were the stable ones. The couple that worked." "We did work for a long time," I told him. "But people change, Daniel. Your father changed, or maybe he'd always been that person and I just didn't see it. Either way, I couldn't stay in a marriage where I was invisible." "He asks about you," Daniel said. "Every time we talk, he asks if I've seen you, how you're doing. I think he regrets it." "Maybe he does. But regret doesn't undo the damage. And honestly, honey, I don't want him back. I'm happier now than I've been in years." Daniel studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "I can see that. You look lighter. Younger even." "I feel younger," I admitted. "I feel like I'm finally living my life instead of supporting someone else's." Emma's journey was different. She'd been closer to me than to Kenneth, and she'd seen the cracks in our marriage more clearly. She was angry at her father, protective of me, and struggling with her own feelings of betrayal. "How did you know when it was time to leave?" she asked me one night, curled up on my couch in my new apartment, drinking wine and talking the way we used to when she was in high school. "I'm not sure I did know," I said honestly. "I think I held on longer than I should have because I was afraid. Afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over, afraid of what people would think. But then I realized that staying was scarier than leaving. Staying meant accepting that I was too old for love, that I'd peaked, that the rest of my life would be smaller and quieter, and less than what I'd hoped for." "You were never too old for love, Mom. Dad was an idiot for saying that." "He was. But you know what? I'm grateful he said it. Because hearing those words, really hearing them, woke me up. It made me realize that I'd been living half a life, waiting for permission to want more, to be more. And I don't need permission anymore." Emma smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "I'm so proud of you, Mom. For leaving, for starting the cafe, for not letting him diminish you." "I'm proud of me too," I said. And I meant it. The cafe opened on a sunny Saturday in April, almost exactly 1 year after I'd overheard that phone call. The turnout exceeded my wildest hopes. Friends I'd made through the community center, old teaching colleagues, women I'd met at the gala who'd shared their own stories of survival. Charlotte came, Kenneth's former client's wife, and she brought half a dozen friends. Even some of my former students, now adults with families of their own, showed up, saying they'd seen the announcement on social media and wanted to support me. The local newspaper sent a reporter who wrote a beautiful piece about second acts and women reinventing themselves in midlife. A food blogger came and raved about Rose's soup. A book club asked if they could meet there monthly, and within weeks we had 5 different book clubs on our schedule. And standing near the back, looking uncomfortable but present, was Kenneth. He'd shown up without warning, without invitation. I spotted him while I was giving a little speech, thanking everyone for coming and sharing my vision for Chapter 2 Café. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse. After the speech, after I'd cut the ribbon and thanked the crowd and posed for photos, he approached me. "Vivian," he said quietly, "can we talk? Just for a minute." I almost said no. Almost told him to leave, that he'd lost the right to my time and attention. But something made me nod and lead him to a quiet corner near the back of the cafe. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he started, his hands shoved in his pockets, his shoulders hunched. I know I don't deserve it, but I needed to tell you. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry for what I did to you, for the things I said, for making you feel like you weren't enough when the truth is, you were always too good for me. I studied him. He looked older than he had a year ago, the lines around his eyes deeper, his hair grayer. He looked diminished somehow, like he'd shrunk. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. But I need you to understand something, Kenneth. I didn't build this cafe to prove anything to you, or to show you what you lost. I built it for me, because I finally realized that I didn't need your validation or anyone else's. I needed my own. He nodded, swallowing hard. This place is incredible. You did something amazing. I did, I agreed without false modesty. And I'm going to keep doing amazing things. There was a long pause. Then he asked, did you ever love me? At the end, I considered lying, being kind, but I'd spent too many years hiding the truth. I loved who I thought you were, I said. I loved the man I married, the man who brought me wildflowers and told me I was beautiful. But that man disappeared years ago, and I spent too long loving a ghost. I'm not angry anymore, Kenneth. I'm just done. He nodded again, his eyes wet. I'm happy for you. I mean that. I believe you, I said. And I did. Is there any chance? He started, then stopped himself. Never mind. That's not fair to ask. No, I said gently. There's no chance. We're done, Kenneth. Truly done. But I don't wish you harm. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I hope you learn from this and become a better person. I'm trying, he said quietly. It's hard starting over at my age. I almost laughed at the irony. Yes, I said. It is. But it's not impossible. I'm proof of that. And then he left. I watched him walk out of my cafe, out of my life in any meaningful way, and felt nothing but relief. That was 2 years ago. Today, Chapter 2 Café is thriving. We've been featured in local magazines, won awards for Best Independent Bookstore, built a loyal community of readers and coffee lovers. We host book clubs, open mic nights, writing workshops, even the occasional small wedding or private event. The cafe has become exactly what I envisioned, a gathering place, a sanctuary, a physical manifestation of the truth that it's never too late to begin again. I've hired a fantastic manager, Sophie, who handles most of the day-to-day operations, which gives me time to pursue other interests. I've started writing again, not just journaling but actual writing. I'm working on a memoir about reinvention, about finding yourself after you've lost yourself in someone else's story. I have an agent now, and we're shopping the manuscript to publishers. Whether it sells or not, the act of writing it has been transformative. I've also started teaching again, but differently than before. I volunteer at a women's shelter, teaching literacy skills to women who are rebuilding their lives after abuse or homelessness. It's humbling and heartbreaking and incredibly rewarding. These women remind me that my struggles, while real, were nothing compared to what many women endure. They inspire me with their resilience, their courage, their refusal to be defined by their circumstances. In general conversation, I've discovered a passion for mentoring younger women, navigating their own career and life transitions. Several of my former students have reached out over the years, and I've become an informal advisor to a handful of them, helping them think through job changes, relationship challenges, and dreams they're afraid to pursue. Emma lives in Portland now, having relocated from Seattle to be closer to me. She's engaged to a wonderful man named Tyler who treats her with the respect and love she deserves. I'm hosting their engagement party at the cafe next month, and I couldn't be happier for her. Daniel visits regularly from San Francisco, where he's a successful software engineer. He recently introduced me to his girlfriend, a brilliant data scientist named Priya who makes him laugh constantly. My relationship with both children has deepened since the divorce. We're more honest with each other now, more real. They've seen me vulnerable and strong, broken and rebuilt. And I think that's taught them something important about resilience, about the fact that you can survive the worst moments of your life and come out better on the other side. As for my personal life, I've been dating. Not frantically or desperately, but thoughtfully and selectively. I've gone on coffee dates and dinner dates and walks in the park. I've met men through friends, through the cafe, through a book club I joined. Most of the dates have been pleasant but haven't led anywhere. And that's okay. I'm not in a hurry. For the first time in my adult life, I'm comfortable being alone. I like my own company. I like coming home to my quiet apartment, making myself dinner, reading in bed without having to accommodate anyone else's schedule or preferences. But 6 months ago, I met someone who makes me think that maybe, just maybe, there's room in my life for partnership again. His name is Thomas, and he's a professor of literature at Portland State. He's 57, divorced with 2 grown sons. He's kind and funny and passionate about books, and when he looks at me, he really sees me. Not who he wants me to be or who I used to be, but who I am right now, a woman in her 50s who's built a second life from the ashes of her first one. We're taking it slow. Neither of us is in a rush to merge our lives or make grand promises. But there's something there, something tender and promising. He brings me first editions of books he thinks I'll love. I make him dinner and we talk for hours about literature and life and what it means to start over in midlife. It's not the wild, passionate romance of my 20s, it's better. It's built on honesty and respect and genuine affection. I'm learning that love doesn't expire. That you're never too old for tenderness, for passion, for someone who chooses you every day. As for Kenneth, last I heard, he was working as a property manager for a small rental company. He lives in a modest apartment, drives a used car, lives on a strict budget. He's dating someone, not Sandra, that ended badly, but I don't know or care about the details. Daniel says he seems subdued, humbler than he used to be. That the experience broke something in him but maybe also taught him something. I hope that's true. I genuinely hope he's learning and growing and becoming a better person. And here's the twist that brings us full circle to my title. About 6 months ago, I needed to hire someone to help with cafe maintenance, cleaning, minor repairs, that sort of thing. It's not glamorous work, but it's necessary. I posted a job listing on a local employment site, emphasizing that we were looking for someone reliable, detail-oriented, and willing to work early mornings. And guess who applied? Kenneth. He showed up for the interview on a Tuesday morning, looking sheepish and desperate. I almost didn't recognize him at first. He'd lost weight, his clothes were less expensive than he used to wear, and there was something defeated in his posture. He'd been struggling to find work, his reputation still tainted by the scandal, his savings depleted by his own legal fees and the settlement. He needed a job, any job, and apparently he'd swallowed enough pride to apply at my cafe. We sat across from each other at one of the cafe tables, the morning light streaming through the windows, and for a moment, it felt surreal. 2 years ago, we'd been married. Now I was interviewing him for a maintenance position at the business I'd built with money from our divorce settlement. "Why do you want this job?" I asked, keeping my voice professional. He looked down at his hands, hands that used to close million-dollar real estate deals, hands that used to gesture confidently in boardrooms. "I need the work," he said simply. "I know this is awkward. I know you'd probably rather hire anyone but me. But I'm a good worker, Vivian. I'm reliable. And I promise I won't cause any problems." I studied him. Part of me wanted to send him away, to tell him that he'd forfeited any claim to my consideration when he'd betrayed me. But another part of me, the part that had spent 2 years rebuilding myself, saw an opportunity for something different. "If I hire you," I said slowly, "there would be boundaries. You'd report to Sophie, my manager. You'd be an employee, nothing more. You wouldn't get special treatment, and you wouldn't be able to use our history to avoid accountability if you didn't do your job well." "I understand," he said quickly. "And you'd need to understand that this cafe is mine. My space, my dream, my accomplishment. You'd be working for me in the business I built after you told me I was too old for love. Can you handle that?" He flinched but nodded. "I can handle it. I deserve it, actually." I should have turned him away. I should have told him to leave and never come back. Every logical part of my brain screamed that hiring my ex-husband was a terrible idea, that it would complicate things, that I'd regret it. But looking at him, really looking at him, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not the arrogant executive who'd betrayed me. Not the man who'd reduced our marriage to an obligation. Just a person who'd made terrible choices and was living with the consequences, trying to find a way forward. "All right," I said. "You start Monday at 6 a.m. Sophie will train you on what needs to be done. The pay is $15 an hour to start, with the possibility of a raise after 3 months if you prove yourself. You get one 15-minute break per shift and a half-hour unpaid lunch if you're working more than 6 hours. Relief flooded his face. Thank you, Vivian. I won't let you down. You're not letting me down or not letting me down, I said firmly. You're just doing a job. That's all this is. That was 6 months ago, and Kenneth has been working at Chapter 2 Café ever since. He shows up on time, usually early actually. He does his work without complaint. He cleans the floors, wipes down tables, takes out trash, handles minor repairs, restocks supplies. The unglamorous, necessary work that keeps a business running. He's polite to the customers, professional with the staff. He keeps to himself mostly, doing his work and leaving when his shift ends. Sometimes I catch him looking around the cafe, at the customers reading in comfortable chairs, at the art on the walls, at the success I've built, and I can see him processing what he lost. But he never says anything about it. He just goes back to work. My staff knows our history. When I told Sophie I was hiring him, her eyes went wide. Are you serious? She asked. Your ex-husband? The one who? Yes, I said. That one. Why? I thought about how to answer that. Because he needs a job and we need help. Because I'm not threatened by his presence. Because watching him mop the floors of the cafe I built with our divorce settlement feels like a very specific kind of closure. Sophie laughed despite herself. That's either the most forgiving thing I've ever heard or the most savage. I'm not sure which. Maybe both, I said. The other staff members were more dubious. Marcus the barista said he'd be watching Kenneth closely to make sure he wasn't trying to sabotage anything. Rosa took me aside and asked, in her gentle motherly way, if I was sure I wanted to do this to myself. I'm not doing anything to myself, I told her. I'm offering a job to someone who needs one. What he does with it is up to him. And you know what? It's worked out fine. Kenneth does his job. I run my cafe. We exist in the same space without drama or tension. He's just an employee now, nothing more. But sometimes on quiet mornings before we open, when he's mopping the floor and I'm reviewing the day's schedule, I'll catch him watching me. There's something in his expression, regret, maybe, or wistfulness, or just the recognition of how dramatically our situations have reversed. I used to be the one serving him, supporting him, existing in the background of his success. Now he's the one keeping my space clean, supporting my business, existing in the background of my life. Is it petty? Maybe. Is it satisfying? Absolutely. But more than that, it's proof. Proof that I survived. Proof that I thrived. Proof that being told you're too old for love isn't a death sentence, it's a wake-up call. I'm 55 now. I run a successful business. I'm writing a book. I'm dating a wonderful man who sees me as a whole person, not a supporting character. I have deep, honest relationships with my children. I have friends who value me. I have a life that's entirely mine, built on my terms, reflecting my values and dreams. And Kenneth? Kenneth cleans my floors. I don't say this to be cruel. I say it because there's a poetry in it, a symmetry that feels like justice. He thought I'd fall apart without him, that I had no value beyond being his wife. He was wrong. Spectacularly, undeniably wrong. And every day that he shows up to work at Chapter 2 Café, he's confronted with the evidence of just how wrong he was. Do I regret hiring him? No. Because it's a daily reminder, for both of us, of how far I've come. When I feel doubt creeping in, when I have a hard day or wonder if I'm really doing okay, I look at Kenneth mopping the floor or taking out the trash and I remember, I was the one who was too old for love. I was the one who was supposedly nothing without him. And yet here I am thriving. And here he is working for me. Life has a funny way of delivering justice. Not always and not always fairly. But sometimes, if you're patient and strategic and willing to fight for yourself, things work out in ways you never imagined. I'm living proof of that. So if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told you're too old, too much, not enough, I want you to know something. You're not too old for love. You're not too old for dreams. You're not too old to start over and build something beautiful from the ashes of what broke you. Take it from me. Take it from someone who heard the worst thing her husband could say, who faced financial uncertainty and social embarrassment, and the terror of starting over in her 50s. Take it from someone who's standing on the other side now, stronger and happier and more herself than she's ever been. You're never too old for a second chance. You're never too broken to rebuild. And you're never ever too anything to deserve love, including love from yourself. Did I do the right thing? Did I handle it the way you would have? Would you have hired your ex-husband to work at your cafe? Or would you have sent him away? Tell me in the comments. Tell me your own stories of survival and reinvention. Tell me if you've ever felt too old for something wonderful and how you proved yourself wrong. Because we're all writing our own chapter too, whether we realize it or not. And your story isn't over until you decide it is. Did you like my story? Which part moved you the most? Tell me in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more life stories like this. With love and respect, Auntie Helen Stories.